Hi, everyone. We are Robson, Bittencourt, and Susana Dávalos, and today we want to discuss bilingualism and multilingualism in education, particularly regarding identities, ideologies, and empowerment. Are you ready for this journey, Susana?
I sure am.
All right. In this presentation, based on Ofelia Garcia's article, Multilingualism and Language Education, we are going to offer a reflection about all these issues. Before we move on, let's read a quote by the educator. Bilingual education is much more than a technique or a pedagogy. Bilingual education is education, and it is also a way of equalizing opportunities. It rests on principles of social justice and supports social practices for learning. Now, in this new section, we'll go over some historical accounts on the issue. Let us first look at the so-called colonizing ideologies. Before the 20th century, speakers of languages other than English, they were viewed as colonized minorities expected to fail in English education due to their perceived inferior status. Later, the focus remained on monolingualism for industrialized nation building, leading to the suppression of indigenous languages and the decline of multilingualism. Secondly, there were the critical ideologies. In the mid-20th century, scholars and policymakers realized that monolingual English education wasn't effective for minority communities. Unfortunately, they still did not recognize bilingualism or multilingualism per se. Later, nation-state ideologies emerged due to globalization. Despite initial tolerance, however, bilingual education faced obstacles towards the end of the 20th century, since some states prohibited bilingual programs in favor of English-only approaches, like ESL. Finally, there were the neoliberal ideologies. From the 1970s, profit extraction from colonized Lotte-speaking populations shifted from imposition to manipulating market forces, exploiting multilingualism within English-speaking societies for neoliberal expansion. Okay, now let us turn to some critical issues which my colleague Susana will present.
Well, one critical issue in this debate is power and ideologies. As Garcia explained, the concept of power and who control the school's impacts on language and education programs. It determines who language is taught and which language practices are valued and which are minorized. Hegemonic programs often encourage monolingualism, especially in English-speaking contexts. One important issue refers to schoolholders, that is the involvement of parents and the community in language education. Unfortunately, parents of language minorities often do not have the social capital to influence school programs. Also, elective bilingual, who often come from privileged groups, choose bilingualism. On the other hand, circumstantial bilinguals such as immigrant and indigenous groups are forced to do so. Then thirdly, there is the issue of pedagogies and practices as well that we are going to be discussed in more detail in the next slide. Finally, another issue is the importance of assessment. One problem here are the standard tests that are tests which are predominant in English-speaking education. But let's remember that this kind of tests not just give like complete or really true results. Now we're going to talk about pedagogies and practices. We're going to start with a grammatical approach that includes three more traditional methods that are the grammar translation, direct method, and audiolingual method. They all just focus in learning the grammar structures. And another framework in this is the communicative approach. But in this case, this approach uses immersion methodology and integrate content-based methodology. Then thirdly, there is a cognitive approach which supports the transfer of knowledge stored as a schemata or production system in one language to the learning of new tasks in an additional language. Finally, another approach is that language arrangements whose practice has been that the home language of the students can never use and the teacher should exclusively use the additional language. So we're going to now move to current contribution with Robson.
Thank you, Susana. So currently, some new approaches are emerging. For example, language and bilingualism are being redefined. Fortunately, language and multilingualism are not static systems. Rather, they are dynamic strategies for social interactions, which are shaped by social, cultural, and political factors. One model that goes beyond traditional approaches is translanguaging. Translanguaging emphasizes that language practices are flexible selections, challenging static language boundaries. Also, language education programs are undergoing changes. One example are the dynamic plurilingual education programs, which focus on the existing language practices of students. This helps to integrate them throughout the day to scaffold English development. So all these innovative ideas and debates are very promising, and they give hope that the issue of bilingualism and multilingualism may be addressed more positively in the future. So what is the future? We see the future with optimism. It is our role as educators to help empower the stakeholders and bring about positive changes. Are you ready for this mission, Susana?
I am definitely ready to try it.
Thank you.
Thank you to you, Robson.